Good morning, everyone. I'm Dick Levinson. On behalf of the Senior Center here at Central, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our program this morning. We're here today to talk about the life and work of the incredible Nina Simone. And our guest expert this morning is the author, music critic, and musician, Tom Moon. I'll be introducing Tom in just a couple minutes, but before I do, there's several points I want to touch on briefly. I'd like to say a few words about our next program, which is actually coming up tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. So I hope you'll be with us. Our focus at that time will be on forgotten giants, Henry Clay, James Polk, Sarah Polk, and the America they made. So this will actually be a journey back to the period of the 1850s. This is a time when compromise was not a dirty word in America, and when the American people were looking to Congress and to the president to cooperate to get important things done. Our guest for tomorrow's program is Dr. Amy Greenberg. She is a historian at Penn State. It'll be her challenge to bring these people and those times alive for a contemporary audience. So I really hope you can join us tomorrow. A quick reminder that you can shoot Tom Moon a question at any point during the program this morning. Just look for the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And we're going to do things a little differently this morning. Usually we ask people to, or we ask our guests to not take questions until the end. At Tom's request, we're going to do it in a more relaxed, fluid way today. He'll be taking questions while he's talking about a particular person or thing. So there'll be a stream of questions all the way through today's program, which Tom will control. If you're not on our mailing list, we would love to have you join. And it's so simple to get on. Just shoot me an email at Levinson, it's Levinson, Levinson R, at freelibrary.org. Now, here are some things you should know about our guest this morning, Tom Moon. He is a saxophonist. He has done everything from multiple tours with the Maynard Ferguson Orchestra to playing on cruise ships. And as those of you who are local already know, Tom was the music critic for the Philadelphia Inquirer from 1988 to 2004. He is the author of the New York Times best-selling book, 1,000 Tunes to Listen to Before You Die. And, you know, to make things less complicated, since 1983, Tom has been continuously writing about pop, rock, jazz, blues, hip hop, and world music. He has been a regular contributor to National Public Radio's All Things Considered since 1996. And I should say that, you know, Tom is part of a very elite club, that small group of folks who have twice won the very prestigious Deems Taylor Award from the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. That's ASCAP to the rest of you. So it's now my pleasure to turn the program over to Tom.
Thank you very much. And I am so excited to be here. I wish we were in person, but hey, you know, and I'm going to apologize for the glare behind me. I work in a small office, and this is the only way to do Zoom. So I love to talk about just about any artist, but I'm really thrilled to talk about Nina Simone because she is one of a handful of American artists who resists every kind of pigeonhole. She hated being called a jazz singer. I'll read you a quote in a minute about that. She started as a classical pianist. She probably was the singer in the 1960s more responsible and acting more as a catalyst than any other about raising awareness and calling attention to the civil rights movement. She understood calypso. She wrote songs that were calypso songs. She wrote gospel. So she defies all kinds of categorical thinking. And uh, when you encounter an artist like that, you really have to pay attention to a wide sweep of her work. And the problem with that, with Nina Simone, is she never made one classic record. We're going to listen to some stuff today that covers the entire span of her career. And each of the records that they're drawn from are beautiful and good in spots, but they're not like Miles Davis's Kind of Blue, where it's a classic from beginning to end. She had the ability to make a track that would stop you cold, and you could listen to that track over and over, and then the next one would not be anywhere near that same level of intensity. And she was more, I think, she was more persuasive in live performance than she was on record, with some exceptions. So I'm going to get, I've done some bullet point takeaways. And the first is, and this is really important to understanding her later, and it has some Philly in it. And that is, she began as a classical pianist. She understands classical music in a way that very few people who came to prominence in jazz, and certainly very few singers, understood. She really has control of the harmonic motion of Bach, Mozart. She just has that music in her. Structurally and harmonically, she comes from classical music. She was very persuasive as a blues singer, don't get me wrong, but there's something important about the way she organizes her phrasing and her chords, and how she uses this classical information. And you can hear this very clearly from one of her very first records, which is a standard song called For All We Know. And it was recorded on Bethlehem Records. She was only on Bethlehem Records at the very beginning of her career for about 2 seconds. But she recorded this, and listen to the way the piano behaves as she starts to sing. She does a piano intro, and she recorded this a couple times with in different configurations. And when Miles Davis heard it, he said, you know, this is very unusual to hear a 2-part invention at the piano, and then the same person live creating a 3rd part with her voice. Listen to this. This is For All We Know.
For all we know, we may never meet again. Before we go, make this moment live again. We won't say goodbye until the last minute. I'll hold out my hand, and my heart will beat it. For all we know, this may only be a dream.
So you hear that, right? It's not a jazz singer doing a standard Great American Songbook tune. She's doing something entirely different presenting this. And why I like this, it's very early in her career, and it speaks to her immediate preceding history, which was she grew up in North Carolina, trained as a classical pianist, studied, and came to Philly to audition for Curtis, thinking she would, after actually a year at Juilliard, came from New York to Philly to audition for Curtis. She thought for sure she would get in. She didn't. And there's plenty of controversy about this. You can read all about it. I'm not going to dwell on it because it's kind of a he said, she said thing. But it's well documented. It's discussed in documentary films about her and stuff. The bottom line is that she was even in the room, and that as someone that we associate with as being such a catalyst for jazz, she was really quite adept classical pianist. And here's how we know that. The people who she auditioned for, often at Curtis, this is a tradition there, where they would actually, for artists that didn't get into the school, that were not accepted, they would take them into their studio and work with them privately so that they could audition again, submit again. And she got that from this great pianist who was there for a long time, Vladimir Sokolov, whose wife is also a pianist, still living, I believe. And so she had this other experience after not getting into Curtis that continued in this way. Now, of course, fate is a fickle thing, right? She, while she's living here, she needs money. And she begins, her mother is very upset that she would sing jazz. So she changes her name to Nina Simone, and she got a gig playing piano at the Midtown Bar and Grill in Atlantic City. Now, that's interesting because it's one of those places that did nurture talent, and she worked there a lot. But it's also interesting because she started out, she was hired just to play piano. And at a certain point in her time there, they asked her, and in fact, suggested strongly that she needed to sing as well. Now, up to that point, as far as I know, she did not sing publicly. So the second real takeaway in the building blocks that made Nina Simone who she was, is that she sang in public in a bar. She did not have a conservatory style experience to start as a singer. She sang in a bar. Now, to me, that's interesting for a lot of reasons. One, that pretty quickly when you're playing in a bar whether you're getting your message across or not. And in the course of doing this over several years, she really developed into the singer that we know now. And what did she sing? She sang Tin Pan Alley songs. She sang show tunes. So she had to have this repertoire that was very common at the time of music that was popular. This is the late 1950s, right? So there's a lot of jazz, and she probably had some of that in her repertoire, but more likely she was someone who was playing the sort of Broadway hits, Rodgers and Hammerstein, etc. And her first big breakthrough is the great song "I Love You, Porgy," and we're going to hear it. By 1962, she's on TV, and we're going to hear a TV version of it. And I like this. It's not the best audio, but I like it because it shows us how she did what she did in live performance. I was lucky enough to see her at Irvine here and at a jazz festival in New York. And both times it was arresting just to be in the room. She had that thing, her nickname was High Priestess of Soul, but she had that thing where when she entered a stage, just by her energy, just by her intention, you felt like you're in the presence of something special. And this was a person who knew what she was there to do. And I think you even see that on this clip. So here's 1962, her first real hit, breakthrough hit, I Loves You Porgy.
They're so soft and fine, and they're just off the line. I'm talking about the food I sell. I'm talking about my devil crayons. Devil crayons for my daddy, my sweet daddy, and my baby. Don't you know I love you? Don't let them take me. Don't let them handle me and drive me oh so mad. Baby, if you can keep me, I want to stay here with you forever and ever. I'll be so someday I know he's coming to call me. He's gonna handle me and hold me so. It's gonna be like dying again. Deep inside me when he calls me. Oh, but when he comes, I know I'm gonna have to go. I love you, Foggy. Don't let him take me. Don't you let him handle me and drive me oh so mad. If you can keep me, I'm gonna stay here. You forever. I got my man.
Wow, right? Oh man.
Tom,
There's so much this.
I wanted to interrupt a second to say that Bonnie Zetek has a really good question here for you. Does Nina Simone do her own arranging? And I'm sorry, I should let you finish your thought as well.
Oh no, that's fine. Yes, she does. And you hear it there, and here's where it came from, I think. It's that experience of playing in a bar. What would you not have at a bar in Atlantic City, even pre-gambling in Atlantic City? What would you not have? You would not have silence. You would not have people listening to you intently. So the minute that she becomes an artist where people are paying attention to her and they're kind of hanging on her every phrase, she is developing this sense of arrangement. That is her. All the stuff we hear today, with the possible exception of the very last track, was conceived, arranged, often produced by her. This is, this is part of her art. And another takeaway that I really want to hit, and I can't emphasize this enough, is that as we hear there, she's comfortable with silence. She is fine with letting a phrase sit there and ring out. And she's really she's brave in that way. We have singers today that would not let a millisecond pass before they give us a flourish of something. With Nina Simone, what you get is every phrase is considered and sculpted and arranged at the piano in this way where it becomes something other than just a line of lyrics. She's actually inside. I feel very much that she's inside these melodies, and in this way that brings us as listeners inside these melodies. And this is like that. That's some almost paranormal level of art. She did this all the time. And I think that, when I talk to musicians, especially young musicians, about what should they listen to and stuff like that, I almost always suggest that they spend some time with Nina Simone, a version of that tune, anyone, because there's a bunch of other great recordings. And as I said, she's unfortunately not the person who had like the kind of blue breakthrough album. She just had these isolated, stellar, incandescent performances all through her career.
There's also a related question too. Does she play other instruments besides piano? And
that's a good question. I think she did play percussion, and there's a tambourine on the piano. I don't know if she was to play that at some point in that set or not, but I don't honestly know. And that it really is interesting because as she goes along, I said, she explores calypso, she explores other Caribbean styles and forms. She writes in a way that makes you think, wow, she could have been very fluent in other realms that we didn't, that are not as well documented or not like sort of front and center in her world. But this idea that she is not just a jazz singer, I think is really important. She has a quote that I've seen several places, and I don't know where the attribution is. After this song, Porgy, was a hit, she really did not like to be compared to Billie Holiday. And she says, I don't like to be put in a box with other jazz singers because my musicianship was totally different and in its own way superior. This is from her autobiography, by the way, which is called I Put a Spell on You. It was a racist thing. If she's Black, she must be a jazz singer. It diminished me. I think that's right. And she believed that she was denied entrance to Curtis because of her race. That may be true. There, as someone commented, there's a history of that at Curtis. Certainly in that era, it was unconscionably common. But either way, she understood that her value as an artist was outside of that box. And I've said a couple times about her records being erratic. Ironically, one of the records that I think is most consistent from start to finish is a record where she's doing a bunch of pop tunes. It's called To Love Somebody, and she does the Bee Gees' To Love Somebody. She does a couple Beatles songs. She does songs from, the pop hits of the late 60s. And in one of the box sets, her guitarist, Rudy Stevenson, talks about the audience and like the experience of working with Nina Simone over many years and how just even the type of work they did suggested that she was defiant about not being put in the jazz box. He says, we played the Apollo Theater with Sammy Davis. We performed at jazz concerts with big artists like Miles or Train. We were in Las Vegas and Lena Horne was there. We worked in London and the Beatles came to see her. And that to me is the thing. She was someone who easily traversed different musical worlds because she did not want to be, and she actively resisted the jazz box. There's another one, another one of these bullet points that I wrote down that I think is key. She also wrote music in a way that was not like the typical jazz chanteuse kind of songs. And by that, I mean, she later she writes some very focused, direct songs in the civil rights era. But even at this early point, or in the mid 60s, she's writing stuff that defies a categorical box. And a song that I keep coming back to in this moment that we're in right now is called For Women. And it's not a genius song, but it is genius. It's a narrative piece that sort of has elements of, we heard her sing the verse to Porgy. It has elements of the verses that were used in Broadway stuff. It's a work of narrative, and she's sketching out the lives of four women, and she's doing it in this way that makes you, first of all, that activates empathy and activates understanding for women that are almost not looked at or were not looked at that time. And she brings you into their experience without like a ton of words, just by the way she does it. And we won't listen to the whole thing. And I want to say that that's your homework if you want homework, because it's a piece. It goes for a while. Anyway, this is For Women.
My skin is black. My arms are long. My hair is woolly. My back is strong. Strong enough to take the pain inflicted again and again. What do they call me? My name is Aunt Sarah. My name is Aunt Sarah. Aunt Sarah. My skin is yellow. My hair is long. Between two worlds, I do belong. My father was rich and white. He forced my mother late one night. What do they call me? My name is Saffronia. My name is Saffronia.
So that's 2 out of the 4. And she's using, structurally, she's using, basically it's kind of a tune like Summertime, a very blues kind of oriented piece, but it's not the blues. And it's this other thing. And that to me is just such a quintessential aspect of Nina's craft, is that she's never just doing a cover, or she's never just writing something that fits in a box. This is a song that looks at the world, and as she evolves, she becomes more that she becomes bolder in that way. She brings more of her life experience as a Black woman into her art, and of course, in the 60s, she is sort of at a nexus of the civil rights movement as it goes. She was one of very few artists who actually performed for marchers in the 1965 march from Selma to Montgomery. And at that event, she performed a song she wrote called Mississippi Goddamn, which is another one of her kind of set pieces where it's a little bit like a show tune, but it was a galvanizing thing. It was a moment where someone who was really well known by that point was, sort of participating in this historic event in a way that could change minds that maybe she wouldn't have changed in another setting. And I think that's something. Another great jazz singer, Abby Lincoln, said of her, talking about her ability to create activism in music. She said, to really understand the 1960s, you had to hear Nina. And I agree with that. I think that, she didn't write a ton of songs that are, addressing injustice, inequality, Black experience, etc. But the ones she wrote really stuck, and they were, again, of all different styles. I mean, the one that we'll hear now is one she wrote in 1969, and it is a different. It's a gospel song, really. Did anyone see Summer of Soul, the great documentary about the Harlem Cultural Festival that our own Questlove released earlier this year? We could not get a good clip from this, but for obvious copyright reasons. But at this performance, Nina is on the bill of one of these events, and at this performance, she introduces a song that became really a part of her live thing ever from then on. It's called "To Be Young, Gifted, and Black," and it's not like any other song in the quote unquote jazz repertoire. It's really gospel focused. It has dimensionality about Black experience, and it's positive. It celebrates this idea that people who have been marginalized and disenfranchised and like sort of eliminated from an equation of a discussion of what it means to be American. She is saying, we are here, and these are beautiful people, these are beautiful kids, and they deserve everything that every other kid deserves. And she does it in this way that's just like irrefutable. It's dazzling in its simplicity. This is To Be Young, Gifted, and Black.
Oh, what a lovely, precious dream to be young, gifted, and black. Open your heart to what I mean.
So she recorded that 2 months after her performance at the Harlem Cultural Festival in Philharmonic Hall in New York. She obviously has a choir. She has, it's a large force. I don't honestly know if she arranged that entire piece, but it's her writing. She wrote it as a tune, and it endures, even though it is not, again, like the standard jazz song form. It sort of breaks all the rules in a way, but it feels absolutely totally natural, and that is, to me, the mark of a genius. I mean, Miles had that ability too, to take alien things and elements of stuff that shouldn't go together and bring it together and make it work. She did that, and she did that over and over again in all kind of ways. So we see it in that very first thing we heard, where she's essentially not thinking anything but Bach. And I feel like as an artist, that is a huge contribution that people, we journalists write a lot about Nina Simone as this, sort of trailblazing figure and stuff. And, someone who after this, around this time in her life, had trouble with taxes, her relationships. She had mental illness issues. And we focused on that stuff, and at the expense of seeing this just kernel of genius that she had, that runs through a lot of her work. And, the musician she played with, that guy, Rudy Stevenson, whose quote I read before, was with her for a long time. They came to really respect this idea that they knew what the song was going to be when they went on stage, but with Nina, and they could anticipate some of the ebbs and flows of it, but it could always be different. It could always become something else. And she was very much alive to that idea of improvisational work within a small group context. And then, as we hear there, she becomes comfortable in larger forces and different forces as she evolves.
We have a kind of a relevant question here that we've let linger. Did she always perform solo as a vocalist, or did she ever partner up with other singers in a performance?
I'm sure there are clips and recordings of her singing like duets. I gotta believe there are, but not many. And more often, it's these things with choirs or larger forces, like we heard on "To Be Young, Gifted, and Black." But her main, where she was most comfortable as a performing artist was with a trio, with something where there was a lot of space, because she was so tuned into how to use silence. And her influence in that way is heard throughout jazz history. I mean, people who were more happy to be aligned and identified as jazz singers took what she did and ran. I mean, the most obvious example is Shirley Horn, where having heard Nina Simone do this spellbinding, very minimal, not trying to wow you with 1,000 notes kind of approach to singing, Shirley Horn takes it and slows it down even further. And a lot of other singers have been influenced by Nina Simone, not just Shirley Horn, but she's a case where she takes a very specific inspiration from Nina and develops it into a world of her own. I'd argue that Erykah Badu, the great R&B singer who worked with a lot of our, with Questlove and the Roots and many Philly musicians, her primary inspiration is Nina Simone, for all the reasons that we stated. As a thinker, as someone with her own aesthetic that was on board when she started recording and stayed with her and developed and evolved in this many unbelievable ways, to where she was speaking to the culture with songs like Mississippi Goddamn and To Be Young, Gifted, and Black. it's hard to do that, right? It was hard to do that even in the 60s. We sort of think, everyone could write a protest song that would ring the bell and be heard by a lot of people. But actually, a lot of those songs sound dopey now. They sound preachy, not dopey. They're prescriptive in a way that makes them not interesting as art. And with Nina, everything's interesting as art. You're on her next word because of the way she does what she does, her phrasing, her ability to kind of thread some facet of her emotional experience through 5 or 6 minutes of just transcendent music that you can follow from beginning to end. It's not like there are abstract detours. I mean, when she plays, she takes chances, she lunges, she does the jazz things of improvising, but she is still in the emotional tone that she wants to convey, always. And, that is a discipline. That is something that, I fear we're kind of losing in our generations, in our singers now, who are so driven by melisma and show and drama that they forget what they're singing. So that, and I think that's, important to remember with her, especially when, the narrative turns, as it does later in the 70s, to her as a more bitter woman, because of life experience. Again, she did have she did struggle with mental health issues that would have been remediated now, but at that time were not as well understood. And she didn't record a whole lot. And, to me, that's like a shame, that's like shame on the recording industry, because she still had a lot to give. And, we'll hear this piece from, let me make sure I know when this was, from 1978 on the last, she recorded more after that, but this is the last record that I think really gets at this thing I'm talking about of an emotional tone that that she sustains for a long time. This is not a song she wrote. I think Randy Newman wrote this song. It's called Baltimore. And it was produced by Creed Taylor, who was by then very well known for kind of a smooth jazz fusion, a pop jazz kind of sound. And he creates that for her to a degree, but listen to the way her vocal is on this. She's weary. There's some edge in what she's saying, and she brings us into the experience of Baltimore in a way that is transfixing to me.
Beat up little seagull on a marble stair. Trying to find the ocean, looking everywhere. Hard times in the city, in a hard town by the sea. Ain't nowhere to run to. There ain't nothing here for free. Look on the corner, waiting for a train. Drunk, lying on the sidewalk, sleeping in the rain.
Yeah, and you can hear, of course, kind of a reggae groove. You can hear how crisp and on point she is phrasing that. And you can find in her catalog several, sort of calypso type numbers, things with that kind of vibe to them. So she never lost it. She was able to do it, toward the end of her life in a really compelling way. I love that track. I hear that in my head a lot. We had a question that I want to address because I was not conjecturing any or ascribing mental illness to her. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. But it's a nuanced thing because she was also a victim of domestic abuse. And she talks in her autobiography about being hit. And it's understood that, even in the wiki entry, she was diagnosed later in her life with bipolar, but the mental health field, the people who are quoted in this this piece I was reading say that because she was the victim of domestic abuse, it was sometimes difficult to get a proper diagnosis for what she was contending with until later in her life. So, she does, and her daughter has talked about various instances of violence and mental and physical abuse. So I'm not making that up. I guess I wanted to end with Baltimore because it is such an elegy. City is dying, but you don't know why. And when you hear someone whose voice has sort of spoken for the consciousness of so many people, and whose playing and concept of artistry has enriched the lives of so many people, singing in this way, it's sad. There's a real sadness to this piece. It makes you wish you had 2 or 3 more records from her at this point in her career that were really solid records all the way through. But we do have that one, and I would urge you to hear it all the way through because it's good. It's, as I said, she didn't have classic records so much as classic performances, and I hope we got to a few of them today. I can take a few more questions if you have time, if there are any.
There's a couple of hands raised. Francine Pollock, I'm going to call on you. Do you still have your question? I think I've unmuted you. Or actually, I'm sorry, you must unmute yourself, Francine, if you still have a question.
Yeah, well, I had my hand raised, but I think it was in recognition of one of the comments made earlier. But I just did a version of "Feeling Good" by her, and classic, blues song. But there's nothing like her doing that song, which goes along with what Tom was saying about how she phrases and her intonation.
Oh yeah, that's great. And we had a version, maybe we'll play this as the outro, her great I Put a Spell on You, which is so visceral. And she could phrase in this way that was delicate and would hook you in, and then 4 bars later and the next chorus, she just rip your heart out. And she was able to sort of navigate emotional terrain very quickly in her phrasing. And, that's why you felt like you always had to pay attention. You were on the edge of your seat listening to her. And even when I saw her late in her career, it was like, okay, this is a ride. We gotta be alert here.
And there's another question from Beverly Merchant, who raised her hand. Beverly, can you unmute yourself before you ask your question?
Sure, I'll try. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Good. My question is, why do you think she didn't receive greater recognition from other artists? And why do we not acknowledge her today because she was such a great artist?
Well, that is a great question. And if I knew the answer to that, I would be in a different business probably. But I have some thoughts. First, the generation of artists that I mentioned, Erica Badu, India, Irie, there's a generation of younger artists and people following them for whom Nina Simone is the world. And she, and you know, the roots, what she did is the seeds she planted are flowering now. And, you know, it may take us decades to really fully apprehend the enormity of her influence. She's not someone who just hit the jazz singers who immediately followed her. She's someone whose work, because it was so diverse, because it was sometimes very personal and sometimes very, very social, you know, socially aware, because of all the points on the map that she touched, it's not easy to sort of fix on one thing as her influence or her enduring thing. But I feel quite sure that that there are artists walking the earth right now who hold Nina Simone in the highest. Like, she's not only the high priestess of soul, but she's kind of the sun and the moon for those artists. Why didn't she, what prevented the public at large from getting that? I mean, my theories go to the same theory I say about anything that has subtlety and nuance in it, which is that this is a culture that doesn't respect subtlety and nuance and doesn't want to necessarily have the attention and the focus, devote the attention and the focus to music in a way where the subtlety and nuance washes over you and transforms you. We don't have that as our listening endeavor now. We're always swiping to the next thing when we don't like something, we don't understand it. And she was someone who she had to get under your skin a little bit.
And Tom, we also have a question. What venues, if any, did Nina Simone perform at in Philadelphia? And let me also add, before you answer that she studied at the Free Library inside the music department here when she was here for Curtis, or to attempt to get into Curtis. And the music department to this day has a copy of sheet music for Young, Gifted, and Black that she signed for the people of Philadelphia.
That's awesome. You know, I believe, I don't know this for a fact, so I want to be careful. I saw her at Irvine Auditorium. I believe that in the first incarnation of the Electric Factory, she performed at the Electric Factory. She may have performed on jazz festivals at the Academy of Music during the 80s and early 90s, or even, you know, late 70s, when there were jazz festivals produced by George Wein, who did the JVC Jazz Festival in New York. For a while, it was called the Cool Festival or the Mellon Festival here. And it used many venues. I don't know for sure that she performed at the Academy of Music, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah. And yes, also, she did. Dan, good point. She did perform early in her career at Carnegie Hall. And, you know, she had like kind of a meteoric rise after I Loves You Porgy. She was on television a lot. You can find a lot of clips of her performing that song and other songs, you know, starting in like 1961. And, you know, those show a range of venues. But she was, she got hot quickly.
Joe Lex also says, I do not remember her being on the radio and television very much in the 60s and 70s.
Huh. Well, in the 60s, she definitely was. You know, and, you know, all you have to do is ask Dr. YouTube and he'll spit you out a bunch of different things from that era. But it may also be that, you know, some of those may be regional and not for this market. You know, it's very hard in that era to pin down things that we now, like, you know, if it wasn't on network television, did it exist? You know, And what you find out when you look at YouTube is that, in fact, yeah, there was stuff that wasn't on network television. A lot of television from Europe and overseas documented her a lot too. There's holdings that recorded in France that are gettable. Anyone, any other questions? Are we still here?
Tom, I think that I want to thank you for a really great presentation. I want to thank our audience for coming. And I wanted to follow up on your suggestion that I Put a Spell on You becomes our exit music today.
Sweet. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for listening to all this wonderful music. Take care.
Thank you, Tom.
Put a spell on you. Cause you're mine. You better stop the things you do. I ain't lying. No, I ain't lying. You know I can't stand it. You're running around. You know better, Daddy. I can't stand it 'cause you put me down. Yeah, yeah. I put a spell on you. Because you're mine. Spell on you.